Okay, so good afternoon. First of all, welcome everyone. We're here to present an information session on the equipment and machinery scheme for SMEs. Just some house rules to follow throughout this information session. First of all, if you have your microphones on, try to keep them on mute so that no one is disturbed. You can ask the questions directly in the chat box. So you open the chat box and you put your questions there. We will see them periodically, because first we will be presenting from our end, Servizi Europei f'Malta. We will be presenting our services. And if you have any questions about our services, you can post them in the chat and we will answer them. And then we will move to a presentation by Mr. Mark Muscat from the Measures and Support Division, who will be presenting the scheme. And if you have any questions, you can post them in the chat, and then Mark will see to them after he finishes his presentation. Ideally, refrain from asking questions which are very specific to your project. If you have such questions, feel free to send them to us directly by email at info.sem@gov.mt. I think we can move to my colleague, Andrea, who will give a presentation on our services and how we can assist you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So first, I'm going to give a brief outline of who we are as a SEM and the services that we provide. So firstly, SEM, we focus on being the one-stop shop when it comes to anything related to EU funding and anything related to EU affairs. We provide information through a number of information sessions throughout the year, focusing on different funding programs and different funding calls. We also have our website where we put all current open calls for the public to see, and also provide different information with regards to EU funding and success stories of projects that have been awarded. We also provide a number of different services to the public, starting from developing and writing of application forms, where we assist organizations through the process of developing their project and also in the writing of the application forms. And also we have the service when it comes to the implementation support, where we assist organizations in the implementation of their projects. So they have further assistance, not only during the application process, but also after the application process, and we assist the organizations all throughout their project life cycle. Okay. So here are the ways we can assist the public. Firstly, we provide information sessions similar to this one, but we do this on a number of different programs and different funding calls. We also organize a number of training sessions throughout the year. The training sessions focus on 2 training modules which we've developed in-house. The first one is on project development and writing, where we focus on the application process and providing different tips on how to develop and write a successful application form for EU funding. And the second training module that we have developed relates to the implementation process, where we provide information on how organizations can implement a new funded project successfully. Third, we go on to the one-to-one meetings, and here are where we organize meetings directly with different organizations and different representatives from these organizations to discuss their project ideas that they want to implement, see if there are funding calls and funding programs which meet those ideas, and also start the project development process if we find the right funding call for their project idea. Then we move on to the application writing, where we assist organizations in the application writing process, and we assist them in the writing of the application form. And then the final service, which is a relatively new service, has been going on for 2 years now, which is the project implementation support, where we assist organizations in the implementation process of their project. And we can assist organizations in a number of different aspects, which I'll be going on into some more detail later on in the presentation. Project development, so this is one of the core services that we offer. And here we assist organizations in understanding the EU funding programs and EU funding calls more specifically. If they find an EU funding call which they might be interested in, we help them, we give them an idea of what kind of activities they might need to implement to meet the criteria for that EU funding call and a number of different aspects related to eligibility criteria. We help them develop their idea and structure it so it links more with the EU funding call, and help them develop a number of aspects related to their project, which can add more structure, such as the aims, the needs analysis, the objectives, the activities, and so on and so forth. Once the project development phase is over, we move on to the project writing, where we offer a number of different approaches in our service to project writing. Our first approach is vetting with comments, where organizations write the application form themselves, and they send it to us for comments, where we vet it and we provide the organization with comments on how they can improve their application form. The second approach is vetting with amendments, where an organization writes the application form itself, sends it to us, and we do not just provide comments, but we also amend a number of different sections to the application form as we see fit. And the final approach is vetting with completion, where we vet the application form, where we write large parts of the application form. We also work with the organization to get some information on different technical aspects of their project, but we are very much hands-on in the application writing process in the third approach. And then project implementation, as I've already said, here is the starting point of when an organization has been awarded successfully a new funded project. Most organizations do not know where to start once they've been informed that their project was successful, and that is where we can come in and assist the organization in a number of different areas related to the implementation of their project. So first, we can help them in the process of their grant agreement. We can also assist them in aspects related to the procurement phase, if the project does require certain aspects related to procurement. We also help them with reporting and any other questions and areas that they might need assistance on during the project implementation phase. And like this, we can assist organizations all throughout the project lifecycle, both at application stage, but also at implementation stage. And I think now I can leave the floor to my colleague, Sir Muscat.
Thank you, Andrea. My name is Mark Muscat. I'm a program officer within the Measures and Support Division in the Ministry for Economy, European Funds and Lands. As indicated earlier, it would be appreciated if any queries, any questions are written within the chat so that they can be addressed subsequent to the delivery of the presentation. Andrea, seems that the presentation is no longer visible. Okay. I don't know if I can.
I think you can upload your own, Mark. That's okay.
Sure, just give me.
Yes.
Just give me a few seconds while I load up and locate it. And let me just buy myself some time by explaining that the equipment and machinery scheme was launched a couple of weeks back, and it actually opened for applications by yesterday. Now, if I can just find the... So it seems there is somebody who's got their microphone open. Perhaps they could turn it off. So, sure. If you could all just confirm that you can see the presentation.
Confirmed, Mike.
Excellent. So let me find my way to my slides. As indicated earlier, I'm representing the Measures and Support Division. Essentially, the scheme was launched in order to make use of the remaining time frame for the 2014-2020 programming period. And the scheme has a budget of 2 million to support potential beneficiaries that are in a position to benefit from aid in the implementation of small projects within relatively short deadlines. We are aware that business success depends on an enterprise's ability to focus investment towards both expanding and innovating their business operations. And this scheme can assist activities which either expand, diversify, innovate operations, and also by supporting initial investments within an applicant's operation. The way that the scheme works is that assistance is given in the form of non-repayable grants to part finance the investment in equipment and machinery, hence the name of the scheme. It is, however, important to stress that the equipment and machinery to be financed has to directly improve the productivity of the enterprise. This is a central and crucial point in that the item for which aid is being requested has to be demonstrating at actually impacting positively the productivity of the enterprise. The scheme falls within the de minimis state aid regulation, which states that the maximum of assistance that an undertaking can receive within a period of 3 fiscal years is a maximum of 200,000. So if your undertaking has already benefited of de minimis state aid over the past 3 years, that amount will be deducted from the overall total of 200,000, and that might impact the amount that you are eligible to receive from the scheme. The scheme, the minimum funding grant will be of 10,000 and the maximum of 120,000. This entails an aid intensity of 50% for projects in Malta and 60% for projects in Gold Zone. So essentially what it means is that the intervention will have to cost at least 20,000 if you are based in Malta, of which you will receive 50% back, and hence the minimum of 10,000. The way that the scheme is administered is through an open rolling call with periodical cutoff dates. I'll get back to what exactly this means in a few slides. For those of you who might have been familiar with previous schemes administered by our division, EU-funded schemes, the main difference is that no business plan is required at application stage. Quotations do not have to be gathered after the applications has been approved, but they need to be provided with the application itself at application stage. There is no need to provide or submit the full financial statements. And in the case that some documents are missing or incorrect, the way that it is, the scheme is being operated is that from our end, we have the facility to ask the applicant to provide any such missing or incorrect or incomplete documentation. So I've already touched a little bit upon this. The eligible actions are the investment in equipment or machinery, which have to be considered and demonstrated as directly contributing to improving the productivity of the enterprise. An example that I like to use at this particular stage is a television. If you want to buy a television to furnish a boutique hotel room, it's much easier to make the argument that it's contributing to the productivity because a room without a television might not be as attractive as one with a television. It might be more contributing to the productivity of the enterprise when compared to a television behind the reception desk, where there is no real tangible impact on the improvement in the productivity of the enterprise. Another thing to be kept in mind means that within 3 months of the signing of the grant agreement, that is within 3 months of being given the go-ahead from our end, the item or items have to be implemented. And by implemented, we mean the item needs to have been bought, needs to have been received here in Malta, needs to be actually functioning, not gathering dust in a garage or a warehouse somewhere, as well as paid in full. Only new equipment or machinery is eligible for aid, so second-hand or used equipment is not eligible. And there is a maximum of 3 items to be requested for aid. However, multiple items can be, multiple amounts of the same item can be requested. An example here I can use at this stage is that if you are a restaurant and you wish to buy 4 ovens, 3 fridges, and 2 freezers, they would all be considered as separate items, and they would fall within the maximum of 3 items, because they are all bunched together essentially. There are a number of exclusions in line with the RDF regulation and the applicable state aid regulation, and they can be found in the guidance notes of the scheme, which are available from the fondi.eu website. So the call opened yesterday, and the cutoff dates that I referred to earlier are listed there. The cutoff dates are the dates at noon of which any applications received are opened for evaluation. So if an application submitted now and an application submitted at 1 minute before noon of the 13th of February will be evaluated together. If an application is submitted 1 minute past noon, then it will be evaluated with the next cutoff date. What is required at application stage? For every item for which aid is being applied, the technical specifications are required so that we can, from our end, ascertain that the 3 quotations provided are actually compliant with the technical specs identified. A couple of declarations are also required. The de minimis declaration is a form in which the applicant lists what aid they have received over the past 3 years. The application form, the application declaration is one which is available from the application portal, which needs to be downloaded, signed, scanned, and uploaded. Another thing which needs to be provided at application stage are the tax compliance certificates, in which it is ascertained that the applicant has no pending returns or no pending liabilities. Should the applicant have any agreement with the taxman to pay in installments some pending liabilities, we would also accept that as long as the Commissioner for Revenue confirms that the agreement is actually being honored. We also require financial statements. Now, for companies which have been established for a while, these are available on the Malta Business Registry, and therefore they might technically not need to be provided with the application. However, if the applicant is a self-employed individual or a sole trader, they would need to provide us with the income tax returns for the past 2 years. If the applicant has only been established for less than 2 years, whether they are a company or a self-employed individual, they would need to provide us with cash flow projections, as well as an income statement or a profit and loss account, as well as a balance sheet or a statement of assets and liabilities. These financial documents need to be certified by a certified public accountant. in cases where the intervention entails the need for some kind of permit, it also needs to be provided. We also require evidence of private match financing. Now, early on in the presentation, I mentioned that the aid intensity for Malta is 50% and that for Gozo is 60%. That means that if you're based in Malta, you would have to bear the brunt of 50% of the costs, whereas if you're in Gozo, for 40% of the costs. And in order for us to ascertain that you have the necessary financial capability to hold up of your end of your bargain, basically, we need to have some evidence thereof. This can take the form of either a bank statement, this can take the form of a letter of intent from a bank that they are interested in providing financing for the amount being needed, as well as an existing sanction letter which does cover that amount. An accountant's declaration is also considered acceptable in this regard. We also require NACE code confirmation. The NACE code is a 4-digit number which lists the applicant's primary economic activity. This needs to be provided as part of the application, and we need to have some confirmation that this is actually indeed the case. This can be gathered from either the VAT certificate or also from the National Statistics Office via email. Finally, we also require a Gantt chart or an implementation schedule in order that we can, again, ascertain that the length of the period being requested is one which is feasible, essentially. How are applications evaluated? There are two aspects, the gateway criteria and the selection criteria. The gateway criteria ascertains whether the applicant is eligible for aid and whether what they request, they want to finance, is also eligible for aid. The selection criteria assesses the quality of the proposal and the application itself. Let me go through the gateway criteria very quickly. It stands to reason that the application has to be complete, has to be submitted in time, and the correct documents included. Now, the scheme is only intended for aid to SMEs, and therefore we need to make sure that the applicant's undertaking is indeed an SME. They are not therefore large. So we will require the necessary information for both the applicant and then a linked or partner enterprises. We also need to ascertain that the applicant does not operate in an excluded economic sector. There are a number of exclusions listed in the guidance notes, and therefore we need to make sure that the NACE code, and that is why we require the NACE code to be provided, is not ineligible, essentially. It is also important to make sure that what is being applied for is indeed eligible. So you might well apply for tiling, for example, but it's not really eligible under this particular scheme. And also we need to make sure, and hence the need for a Gantt chart, that the project being applied for can be finalized within the time frame indicated. Now, one thing that I might not have mentioned before is that you cannot start works on anything related to what you are applying before we give you the go-ahead. So the process invariably has to be, first you apply, then you wait for our feedback, and it is only once we give the go-ahead that you can go and actually buy or enter into an agreement or pay a deposit, sign a contract to go and buy the item or items. This is tied into the concept of the incentive effect, whereas without the incentive of these funds, you would not have proceeded with this project, and therefore if you have already signed an agreement, then you weren't actually necessarily in need of our assistance. And we've already mentioned the match financing a little while ago. Now, the selection criteria, these are essentially what happens when an application, the gateway criteria for an application are all in order, and then it proceeds to the selection criteria, where a qualitative assessment is done to ensure that the application itself is robust. The application has 100 marks assigned, and there is a breakdown of how each of these marks are assigned. Within the guidance notes, there is a further breakdown of how all of these marks are divided into further sub-criteria and what is expected of the applicant in each section. For an application to be considered as successful, they have to reach the 50% threshold. This is on a first come, first served basis, subject to the budget availability. So from my end, I think that Andrea can take over again for the last slide or two.
I think this is just as an information, so that if you have any questions in terms of specific assistance for your project, you can easily contact Sam, info.sam@gov.mt, and we'll answer your questions there. But in the meantime, I think, Mark, you can take a look at the chat.
Yes.
And we can go through the questions, and
Absolutely.
feel free to keep posting your questions to the chat if they are generic. And yeah.
I just use this opportunity to quench my thirst a little bit. So are Malta enterprise schemes included in your services? I believe this is addressed to you.
I think we've already answered it.
Excellent.
So,
Yes, I have it scrolled down that
Answered
far.
in the chat.
Yes. First question is from Mr. Alex Briffa. If equipment improves quality, is it also eligible? Can you perhaps elaborate on what exactly you mean by the specific question? If the item itself is merely producing the same item at a superior level, I'm sure an argument could be made that the productivity itself is increasing, because you might probably be charging more for an item of superior quality, perhaps. I don't know if you could care to elaborate, Mr. Briffa. Not sure Mr. Briffa is still around. Perhaps we can come back to this later, but I don't see any particular reason why not. Yes, Mr. Triganza, that amount excludes VAT, excludes taxes, excludes shipping, excludes any other costs ancillary to the actual procurement of the item thereof being requested. ċerpunt għallu l-inqas ammont li jrid ikun jiswa l-makkinarju ta' 20,000. Ftakar però li l-20,000, and I'm speaking in Maltese as the question was placed in Maltese, mhuwiex item wieħed li jrid ikun 20,000. Jista' jkollok 4 items ta' 5,000 il-wieħed. Jista' jkollok 2 items ta' 3,000 u 4 items ta' 5,000. Però il-minimum amount totali ma jistax ikun inqas minn 20,000. Teknikament għal-kumpanija awċija jista' jkun ħarira inqas għax il-60% jiġi daqsxejn inqas, imma m'għandix il-calculator qudiemi. Imma for the sake of the argument, 20,000 huwa the minimum spend, yes. What does full financial statements mean, Erika Ġus? Mela, let me swap to English again. For accounting purposes, companies which have a revenue of less than a certain threshold are not obliged to upload that information to the Malta Business Registry. They might choose to avail themselves of their legal right not to do so. In previous schemes, we would have required them to provide it anyway. For this particular scheme, it's not necessary. So essentially, if an enterprise has its accounts uploaded on the Malta Business Registry, and their accounts are, of course, dated within the last 2 financial years, then there is no need for them to submit anything with the application, actually. Is the scheme aiding in funding or tax credits, Martina? As indicated earlier, this is a non-refundable cash grant. It's not tax credit. The way that it works is that you actually have to pay to purchase the items yourself, and then you are reimbursed pursuant to the vetting process. Well, Mr. Triganza, what about VAT, CAIR, and NI compliance? As indicated earlier in the slide, the tax compliance certificate will cover all three of VAT, FSS, and income tax. Being a software company, our laptops, which are our machinery, are these eligible? Theoretically, yes, although perhaps you might be best advised applying under a sister scheme that we have called the SME digitalization scheme, which is explicitly intended to finance the purchase of any item which will aid an increase in digitalization of the enterprise, whether you want to buy better laptops, better monitors, software, hardware, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to go into this particular scheme right now because it's not in the scope of the presentation, but perhaps you may wish to get in touch with us so we can explain. Although in principle, yes, laptops are indeed potentially eligible under the scheme, but then you might have a problem in reaching the 20,000 threshold. Moira Greg, what happens if you have a longer lead time for delivery? That is an important question, and that's something to be kept in mind when considering whether to apply for the scheme or not. If you already know right now that something will take 5 months to arrive, don't apply for the scheme. You have to be ready in 3 months. What if the item consists of a non-off-the-shelf software that requires more than 3 months to be delivered, JP? I refer to my earlier question on the SME digitalization grant scheme. The time frame for the scheme is a maximum of 2 years. So it might fall more within the parameters of that scheme than this one, frankly. Mr. Triganza, yes, you are eligible for funding, despite being a management consultancy firm, as far as I'm aware. I'll check in a little while just to be sure. But there is no reason why you shouldn't be eligible. What you would have to keep in mind is that you would need to demonstrate that the equipment that you are buying will directly impact positively on the productivity of the enterprise, essentially. If it is software or hardware that you wish to finance, you might be best advised to applying under the digitalization scheme. Castania, 3 months for purchasing and installing production equipment looks a bit tight. I see completely where you are coming from. However, keep in mind that we are coming to the end of the programming period. And if the item takes too long to arrive, we might be committing money to funds to applicants who are not in a position to manage to avail themselves of the opportunity in time. While I can again see where you are coming from, there are a number of items that can be purchased and have a much shorter lead time. And that is where, prior to application, why and how an assessment should be made to see that what you want to buy will indeed arrive within 3 months. Because otherwise, there is little point in applying for the scheme, frankly. If we are to move to a new premise space to increase staff space, i.e. productivity, is the cost of the alterations improvements eligible? No, this does not fall within equipment and machinery, unless you are referring specifically to some kind of equipment and machinery that will increase this productivity. However, cost of alterations and improvements, I'm understanding that you are referring specifically to infrastructural work, and that does not fall within the remit of this scheme. So to be clear, if we have benefited with more than 200,000 during the last years, so first of all, you cannot have benefited from de minimis aid of more than 200,000 because that's the upper threshold. Keep in mind that when we are saying de minimis state aid, there are specific schemes that are considered as de minimis. There are other state aid which is not fall within the de minimis 200,000 threshold. And during the, might be the case there is a threshold, there is a typo there, but the 200,000 is for the last 3 years. That is in 2021, 2022, and 2023, not over a rolling period of 36 months. It might be worth having a word with your accountant to see what kind of aid you have benefited from, especially including microinvest, which does fall within the de minimis regime, so that you are aware of what your limit might be. Can you kindly re-explain the 3 items requirement? So let me try and think of another example to the one I used of a restaurant. Nothing particularly comes to mind right now, but what you need to do is you need to identify 3 distinct separate items. And you can buy multiples of each distinct item. So you can buy 3 of this, 5 of this, and 1 of this. Now it's important that these 5, they are all the same. And let me use the example I used previously of an oven. There is an oven, there is a pizza oven, there is a pizza oven which fits 3 pizzas, an oven, a pizza oven which fits 5 pizzas. They are not the same. They are slightly different. So therefore, they would be considered as different ones. You cannot say, I want to buy 5 ovens and all 5 have different technical specifications. That's where the technical specifications come in, because the technical specifications for each item have to be the same, basically. I hope that explained it a little bit more clearly. How long is your evaluation process after the cutoff date? Generally, within a few weeks of the cutoff date, the board will get in touch with the applicants to inform them whether they have been accepted for aid, whether they need to submit more documentation because it was missing or incorrect, whether they are asking for clarifications, or whether it has been rejected. Lately, the process has taken between 2 to 3 weeks within the cutoff date. So it is not a particularly long wait. We are, of course, aware that people want and need to get moving, which is why it doesn't take that long. Can you send the presentation, not just the recording? No problem at all. I'm sure my colleagues will be handling it. Applications can be downloaded from SCM sites. No, actually, applications are on the sfd.gov.mt, unless I'm mistaken, portal. They cannot be downloaded. It is a completely online process. However, on the funded.eu website, we have a sample application form in PDF format so that you can have a look at what kind of sections are in the application, what you are requested to fill in. In my experience, it's not something which will take a lot of time and effort if done right. But of course, you need to pay attention. And this is where our colleagues again at Servizzi Europei F'Malta will
I've
come in.
also just posted the link to the website for anyone who's interested to access it.
Yes, I haven't quite got that done, arrived quite that far yet. Is grant given as tax credits? No, Mr. Galia, the grant is a non-refundable cash grant. Will the business consultancy scheme continue to operate? Yes, Dr. Fairman, the SME consultancy grant scheme is still open. Both this equipment and machinery and the SME consultancy have had cutoff dates announced up till the 28th of April. And there might be the possibility they are extended for a further period. Then again, they might not. But for the upcoming 3 months, they are still available for application. Does the software to improve our operations is applicable, said Philip? Does buying of equipment for rental purpose is eligible? So for software, my recommendation would be to go for the SME digitalization grant scheme. And you can also combine it with maybe some hardware. Buying of equipment for rental purposes, now we're entering into a little bit of gray area. If you want to buy a car to rent out, it's not really within the parameters of the scheme, is it? nor is it if you want to buy items which will be rented out off-site. So this might be the case where you get in touch with us to explain the specificities of your particular situation. Only 3 items are eligible for reimbursement. Yes, 3 items, but you can have multiple of the same item among these 3. What happens if a machine to do a particular job is only made by one company? How is it possible to get 3 quotes? The requirement to get 3 quotes does not mean that the quotes have to be acquired from a company based in Malta. They don't even need to be based in the EU. They can be based outside the EU. UK, USA, Libya, China, wherever. That means that in reality, there are very few items or products which are only made in the whole wide world by just one company. So if the particular item that you're looking for, now we're not talking here about a brand name. So if I want to buy, for example, a tablet, I can get multiple quotations. Now let's move away from the fact that a tablet might not necessarily be eligible, but for the sake of the argument, I can get different kinds of tablets from different type of suppliers. I don't have to specify that I want an iPad, which is brand specific, i.e. Apple. Similarly here, perhaps a machine fulfilling the same requirements can be also produced by other companies. If you cannot get 3 quotations, then my recommendation would be not to apply for the scheme. Ms. Galia, would enterprises operating within the recreational activities sector be eligible for the scheme, please? I'm sure Ms. Galia will be aware that the recreational activities sector is extremely wide-ranging. However, in principle, I do not believe that there is any ineligible sector that would fall within these. Within this sector, perhaps the gambling and online betting sector. My suggestion would be to have a look at the exclusions in section 3.2, I believe, of the guidance notes, wherein the excluded sectors are specifically delineated. Or previous answer, read the laptops. I think a software company would not be eligible for the digitalization scheme. If the software company if a software company wants to apply to buy a laptop, then yes. If an electronic retailer wants to buy a laptop, then no, because they provide the service themselves. In general, you cannot be granted aid for the purchase or creation of items that you have the internal capability to do yourself. So in this particular instance, if the software company can outline that what they do does not include the creation of laptops or the production of laptops, then yes, they would be eligible. What they might not be eligible would the creation of software, because obviously they would have the internal capability to do that themselves. Donna Patch. Yes, I've just addressed that items can indeed be purchased from outside Malta. However, you would then have to keep in mind the fact that the further you buy from Malta, the longer it will take to arrive, and the more it will bite into the 3-month implementation period. Keep in mind that it's not just a question of arriving on the last day of the 3rd month. You need to have paid in full, and the item needs to be fully operational, not gathering dust somewhere. Application can be downloaded from SCM sites. No, Mr. Demek, application can be accessed from the SFD portal, and items can be bought from Italy. Yes, no problem at all. However, you cannot buy the items now, but only after an application has been approved. If a company is eligible, it has a mixture of services that are eligible and not eligible. Mr. Borch, It has a mixture of services that are eligible and non-eligible. By saying that it has a mixture of services, does it mean that it operates in an economic sector that is excluded for aid? Because if that is the case, then no, you are not eligible for aid from the scheme. If I have not understood the question, perhaps you can explain it a little bit more depth. Bella. Did I understand you correctly that you do not need a business plan to submit this application form? Yes, Ms. Fenech, you understood me perfectly right. No business plan is required for this for the scheme. Yes, Ms. Grech, we appreciate that for certain machinery, it might be difficult to have it all delivered, installed in 3 months, but there are certain other machinery which might not take that long. The scheme is aimed to have a quick turnaround. So if you are already aware that it might be very difficult, it might be worth considering not to apply, because you will be granted funds that you will not be able to avail yourself for anyway. How long should these items be retained? Very good question. 3 months after the end of the project, i.e. after the end of the 3 months, 3 years, they should be retained for a full 3 years after the end of the project, i.e. the end of the whole 3 months that we've been speaking about now. If the item malfunctions or needs repairs, the beneficiary is legally obliged to make sure that it is still operational during the 3-year period. From time to time, spot checks are held out at the various beneficiaries to see that the durability requirements, such as this one, are indeed maintained. No, used machinery is not eligible, only new machinery is eligible. In a manufacturing company, tools are essential for productivity. Tools would qualify, yes, certainly, as long as A, the tools being bought can be demonstrated as having a positive impact on the productivity of the enterprise. And secondly, as long as the tools being bought for, I mean, they would fall within equipment, definitely, whether they can amount to the minimum of 20,000 spend. So if you want to buy a couple of drills, I don't think that would make any kind of dent in the 20,000 amount. But yes, in theory, in principle, yes, definitely. Yes, Mr. Manjon, the way that the scheme works is that you would pay the full amount to the supplier, and after the necessary checks are undertaken, the 50% grant, or possibly even less if you did not abide with the regulation, with the procurement regulations, it is then disbursed later. As to how much time will this grant be settled, it's impossible to tell at this time. It depends entirely on how many applications for claim for reimbursement are in hand when yours is submitted. Obviously, if there are 10 applications pending, 10 claims pending, it will take a lot longer to process than if there is only one. However, it is not envisaged that this will take years and years. After all, the scheme is there to ensure that by the end of this year, these EU funds are taken up. Are we obliged to buy from the cheapest quote? No. Good question. I didn't mention it. You do not need to buy from the cheapest quote. However, the cheapest quote is what the amount being reimbursed will be pegged to. So if you have a quotation of 50,000, 55,000, and 60,000, we will give you 50K. That will be the eligible amount, irrespective of how much it actually costs. Zami's question is the same. Is the scheme applicable? Yes, the scheme is also applicable to self-employed individuals, partnerships, cooperatives, as well as limited liability companies. If we are to increase staff, to increase productivity, are desks and chairs considered as eligible? Yes, in theory, again, yes, because it is equipment which is directly impacting on the productivity of the enterprise. However, with 2 desks and 2 chairs, you're not going to make, again, much of a dent in the 20,000 amount. Although if there are any desks or chairs which cost that much, good luck to your employees. More specifically, recreational activities in relation to organization of events. Yes, in this specific case, yes. But the central and crucial matter will be what are the exact items. So the sector itself would be eligible, but it entirely depends on the items for which aid is being requested. Where can we see a list of NACE codes that are entitled to the scheme? No such list exists. However, in section, I believe 3.2 of the guidance notes, there is a list of what is not eligible. Not necessarily NACE codes, although in some cases, yes, there are NACE codes, but sectors as a general rule. Yes, that is indeed the application portal. Are vehicles or lifts considered as machinery? Yes, in theory, they would be considered as machinery. However, now you're going to come up against the 3-month implementation period issue, wherein especially if you're ordering the vehicles for abroad or the lift from abroad, you will also be cutting it, verifying whether you will be able to complete everything within 3 months. Is refurbished machinery still under warranty eligible? No, the only eligible costs are new equipment. What about laboratory equipment that will be used to incoming raw materials? Is this eligible? I don't see why not, as long as it fulfills the criteria. 3 months, 3 months within 20,000 euros, and that's it basically. What evidence is required to prove that there will be increase in productivity? That is where the strength of an application comes in. It is much easier to justify the purchase of a CNC machine for a carpenter, which is self-evidently going to increase productivity, than it is for other items. Nothing comes immediately to mind. That is essentially the role of the applicant to explain it, to outline it. How many applications can be submitted? 1 at a time. Welcome. I seem to have finally exhausted all the questions. I spoke too soon. No, thresholds are set for each and every item. Can you kind of specify what you mean by thresholds? Thresholds of what? As in value? No. The total must be minimum of 20k and maximum of 240k. If you want to buy a machine of 1 million, you could. The maximum that we would be able to give you for it is 120k. Naturally, if you're going to have items of 10 euros, you're not going to reach the 20,000 threshold. But there is no specific threshold, no.
I think we can conclude then. So if, okay, I think there is one last question.
Yes, Mr. Bonavia, self-employed individuals are indeed eligible, yes.
Okay, I will just post a feedback form in the chat right now, so that you can ideally fill it in to just give us your feedback on what you thought about this session. Again, if you have any queries or need assistance in filling in the application, feel free to contact them, or you can also visit our website and request a meeting from there. I hope it was informative, and we'll also keep you updated if there are any similar initiatives, if you have consented to sharing the data with us. Thank you very much, and hopefully good luck with your application.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks.
Bye-bye.